to our first budget meeting for the fiscal year of 2017. Mr. Hunsaker.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. If the papers in front of you are a little warm, that means they just came off the printer. We are pleased today to present to you the 2017 budget message. So the budget presented in July of 2015, we illustrated there would be a difficult budget problem facing the board in 2018, caused by two unrelated issues. First, there was ongoing funding of community health care needs. Secondly, the concern of how to maintain the community's assets over the next 30 years without a revenue source dedicated to those assets. The budget I present to you today develops a plan for funding health care while maintaining a balanced budget. However, it does not solve the challenge for funding the long-term maintenance and upgrades to our roadways, parks, and public safety needs for the immediate or long-term future. In an effort to find solutions for the upcoming 2018 issue, the board created the Citizens Financial Structure Advisory Board. The advisory board met from December of 2015 through April of 2016, and then presented to you and the community a recommendation that they believe will not only solve the funding of this critical need, but will also provide a sustainable solution to the county's budget process. Today, I am presenting the FY17 recommended budget. The FY17 gross budget is $1,167,819,982, with a net budget of $567,921,690. Our county is seeing above average growth for the west coast of Florida, which is helping our financial recovery. However, our government continues to be challenged in both our service delivery and our workforce. Although this is a balanced budget, our funding model is simply not sustainable for the long-term financial health of the county. This year's budget is again reliant on reserves, a bit to a lesser extent than in years past, thanks to increased property tax revenues. However, because of our heavy reliance on property taxes to fund this government, and because voter-approved mandates have limited our ability to meet local demands through property taxes, by next budget year we face a very real possibility of needing to compromise the board's long-standing 20% reserve policy in 2018. Remember, we are still in a position of deficit spending, and if the board chooses to add something to the balanced budget, an equal expense must be removed. We have been extremely fortunate in that growth in our tax base has exceeded our expectations. Based on the property appraiser's latest estimate, we have increased the estimate to 9%. The additional growth has provided funding for increased state mandated costs and critical public safety and capital needs. Total revenues for FY17 recommended budget are $568 million, which is a $15 million increase in the total net budget from the current adopted budget, exclusive of the port. The recommended budget has historically been presented without the port financial information in order to establish like trends and comparisons. The 9% growth in property values constitutes an increase of $16.5 million in property taxes. Although still increasing, property tax revenue is $26.5 million less than in 2007. So despite the fact that we have grown by 60,000 people over that time, our budget is 11% lower. It is my recommendation to maintain tax millage rates unchanged for the 10th consecutive year. The general obligation bond established for the county is growing closer to its maturity in fiscal year 18, and as a result has a slight decrease in tax requirements due to the end of life of the bond. I have recommended placing the reduction in property taxes from the GO bond within the general fund millage and using the resulting to aid in the payment of community health care. The resulting shift in millage creates no effect on the total millage levied. According to the U.S. Census website, the most current population estimate for Manatee County is 363,369 people, which is approximately 60,000 higher than 2007 levels. The need to address the safety of our growing population remains at the forefront of our concerns. Therefore, similar to the budget I presented last year, the second year of this biennial budget process prioritizes public safety and maintaining assets and service levels for our citizens. The 9% in additional revenues is again primarily invested in the same areas. Those additional revenues are available to fund the following proposed investments for the upcoming fiscal year. First, the Community Paramedic Program sends specially trained professionals into the community to improve access to health care while decreasing overall health care costs. Second, the Marine Paramedic Rescue Unit delivers advanced life support service to the residents and visitors of Anna Maria Island. Third, partial funding for 8 additional school resource officers at Manatee County Middle Schools. And fourth, most important, funding for 8 additional law enforcement officers for the Sheriff's Office. During the economic downturn, the Board of County Commissioners were faced with extremely difficult funding decisions. The board wisely chose to avoid widespread layoffs and reductions in service to the community by prioritizing those areas of the budget. Capital investments for roads, parks, and equipment repair were funded on an as-needed basis, and many of those improvements were postponed until a time when revenues improved. The time to reinvest in those capital needs has come, and we are again recommending more substantial amounts for those assets that have gone some time without repair or replacement. To that end, I propose the following investments. Parks and Preserves infrastructure upgrades, $584,000. Additional unincorporated road system maintenance, $1.5 million. Continuation of the stormwater discharge maintenance program and contracted street sweeping, $525,000. In addition to physical asset maintenance, we have placed a great emphasis over the last several years in technology improvements. By investing in our technological infrastructure, we have been able to keep pace with current technology advances. Further stages of these upgrades are included within this budget, including the public safety radio upgrades that are part of the P25 radio system, now being implemented by Manatee and Sarasota counties. Additional stages of improvement in accordance with our infrastructure upgrades continue within this budget. Stress in the workforce remains a serious concern in our organization. We have attempted to maintain pace with the employment market in the area of employee compensation. Our Pay for Performance program, initiated 3 years ago, has provided an excellent method of rewarding performance while providing a consistent application of evaluation criteria and performance rewards throughout the organization. We have again placed a 4% increase within the budget for all employees of the board and constitutional offices. We anticipate the compensation increase budgeted at 4% of salaries to have a similar distribution format for fiscal year 17, although the ranges of increases may vary. Since lowering our workforce by 300 employees since 2007, I have not recommended new positions funded by property taxes. Where employee positions have been added, they have been funded through user fees and enterprise funds. However, this year, with the growing population and heightened public safety demands, I've recommended 11 new property tax funded positions, 8 for the Manatee Sheriff's Office and 3 for the Public Safety Department. Increased staff levels in other areas of the budget are paid through user fee supported departments and other non-property tax revenues. The allocation of added positions are as follows. There's 7 positions in building departments funded by building fees, 4 in neighborhood services funded by the Southwest Tax Increment Financing revenues, 1 position in parks and natural resources funded by recreation fees. There's 2 positions in property management funded by tourist taxes. There are 7 positions in public safety funded by fees and property taxes. Public Works has 7 from internal charges, and Utilities has 7 positions funded by utility fees, and the Sheriff's Office 8 positions from property taxes. Throughout the economic downturn and into the recovery, our budget strategies and financial policies have not jeopardized the financial health of the county. These strategies have resulted in maintained bond ratings for Manatee County even as the economy faltered. The county's ratings for general obligation debt have been maintained at AAA and AA1 by Fitch and Moody's respectively. Utility debt was rated at AA+ and AA2 by Fitch and Moody's respectively in 2015. The higher ratings have allowed us to issue recent bonds and bond refundings without bond insurance or debt service reserve funds, which is very rare and results in considerable savings on debt obligations. We recommend that our current reserve policies remain in place and other prudent financial management practices continue, so our strong ratings will be preserved for the future. Two large issuances of debt occurred during the current fiscal year. First, the county issued $36 million in general government revenue debt to address several critical maintenance issues, such as the P25 radio system, upgrades to jail facility systems, and maintenance of beaches. By taking advantage of low market interest rates, the county has been able to make significant advances in maintenance and debt service. The second debt issuance was the establishment of a $36 million credit line for design and engineering stages for the long-awaited 44th Avenue improvements. The 44th Avenue project is broken into several smaller stages within our capital improvement program, but is considered one project. Once the project reaches the construction phase, the credit line will be replaced with a bond issuance to fund the completion of the project. Debt issuance for this project is scheduled to occur within the FY17 budget timeframe. However, with all construction projects, timing of issuance will be initiated based on the phase of the project. Debt service for this growth project will be paid by impact fees from the southeast and southwest impact fee zones. The utility system has identified several water and wastewater projects to be scheduled with debt issuance. Highlighted details are within our CIP projects, which will be reviewed by the board's scheduled budget review at the CIP on June 16th.
It's an Amber Alert.
Amber Alert.
Somebody looking for you, Rod? Just an Amber Alert for him. Go figure. As a supplement to the budget message, I have provided an additional document, Exhibit A attached, that provides greater detail with regard to budget issues. These issues include further details on programs such as healthcare funding for the community, increase in public safety expenses, and capital improvement program highlights. The initial budget recommendation is presented in advance of the statutory timetable for the county budget process and is based on early estimate of property values as they stood on December 31st, 2015. Official certified values from the Manatee County Property Appraiser will be available on July 1st, while the County Commission is on recess. County staff will use the July 1 numbers to update the recommended budget so that figures reconcile to the certified values. It is anticipated that only minor adjustments will be required, and by August 2nd, staff will use the reconciled figures to produce and make available to the Commission and the public an updated budget document that will conform to the statutory requirements and timetable. We provide this initial budget recommendation before the formal start of the budget process in July in order to facilitate review by the Commission and consideration of the meeting schedule for June and August. Since this is a working budget, staff may make minor adjustments as more accurate information becomes available up until the formal July 15th budget is produced. When the July 15th budget is produced, it will include a summary of any material changes made through staff adjustments. After the County Commission returns from summer break, an August 2nd, 2016 budget work session has been scheduled so the County Commission can review and update figures and resolve or flag items identified in budget work sessions. At that work session, you will also set the tentative millage rate that will be noticed to all property owners on the truth in millage notices. After today's presentation, the Commission has scheduled 4 budget work sessions on June 8th, 14th, 15th, and 16th, as well as a public hearing on the evening of June 16th. A budget reconciliation meeting at which proposed millage rates will be certified is scheduled for August 2nd. 2 additional public hearings on the budget will be held in September. The September dates have not yet been scheduled. The first public hearing in September will be noticed to all taxpayers via the notices of proposed property taxes sent out by mail. The second public hearing will be noticed by newspaper advertisement published in accordance with state statute requirements. The largest concern facing Manatee County in the aftermath of the recession is our ability to maintain aging and stressed assets and the quality level of service commitments to the community. Manatee County is not unique in this regard. Local governments around the state are struggling with the increased cost for roads, parks, and public safety needs. I believe our situation is more concerning than other governments because of our heavy reliance on property taxes. Remember, since the huge population increase from 2007 to present, a series of voter-approved measures, such as Amendment 1 and portability, now limit the ability for property taxes to keep pace with local growth. As property tax values increase for our community, there is a distinct disconnect in the correlated increase in taxable values. Save Our Homes limits homestead taxable values from increasing to 3% or the percent change in the Consumer Price Index, whichever is less. Prior to Save Our Homes, the taxable value upon which taxes were calculated was equal to the market value less the homestead exemption. When the market value increased, so would taxable value and therefore tax revenues to keep pace with community needs. With Save Our Homes, our county's ability to receive property taxes as home values rise is therefore limited. The majority of our service departments, such as parks, community services, neighborhood services, and areas of public safety, both the sheriff and EMS, fall within the general fund, where 57% of the revenues available are based on property taxes. So as demand for services and cost for services rise, the ability for the county to match cost with revenues are disconnected. There's a table here that shows how that plays out. And if you look at 2016, you'll see that Save Our Homes cap reduced our revenue to the county government by $26 million. Remember I showed you earlier, or stated earlier, that we have an increase of property tax revenue, $15 million. Without the Save Our Homes, we would have increased by $41 million. Pre-recession, that's the way it worked. We would have had $41 million. If you think pre-recession, in those days, we funded from property taxes the operating budgets of the county. We funded capital improvement projects with property taxes, and we put away money for a rainy day in the Budget Stabilization Fund that helped carry us through the recession. Now, with that Save Our Homes, we can barely fund the operating budget, let alone fund the capital project. And of course, we're not putting any money away for a rainy day in the budget stabilization. We're still drawing down that fund. We brought in $15 million of new money. We would have brought in $41 million. We would have been able to fund those things. In 2016, while the county received an increase in property taxes of $14 million, another $26 million was excluded from Manatee County's tax revenues due to Save Our Homes. Let me add another point there. $26 million came from Save Our Homes. Remember, during that same time, we doubled the homestead exemption from $25,000 to $50,000.
Yeah.
That's another $11 million in lost revenue to the government, on top of the 26. You can see how the economics of the government have changed since pre-recession. Now, the change in CPI for 2016 was 0.8. That means people with homesteaded properties in the current year, their property taxes could not go up by more than 0.8. Next year in 2017, that's 0.7. 0.7. That's great news for homesteaded property owners in Manatee County, but a sobering reminder that absent another funding solution, the board faces three possible scenarios in 2018. One, you may continue to rely on property taxes and ask homeowners who are already paying the majority of our costs to pay more in the form of a millage increase. Two, You may choose to reverse our long-standing reserve policy and balance the budget going below the 20% mandatory reserves. This choice, of course, could harm our stellar credit ratings and limit borrowing power in the future. This choice also leaves us vulnerable in an event of natural disaster or other local funding crisis. 3, you may choose to adopt a smaller budget that will require workforce and service reductions in the community. The Citizens Financial Structure Advisory Board recognized that relying on property taxes as our chief funding source is unsustainable for the future. It is an unfair revenue source that asks local homeowners to foot most of the bill for local government and is limited in its ability to keep pace with local growth because of voter-approved and state-mandated tax reform. For this reason and others, the Advisory Board unanimously recommended exploring funding alternatives that will make our government sustainable for the long-term future of Manatee County. Since 2007, the board and our workforce have done a remarkable job continuing to meet the needs of this community. Revenues have risen, and we project additional modest growth for next year. But I believe this is the last year we will have the option to continue the business-as-usual approach to funding local government. There is considerable stress in our workforce. There is considerable stress on our roads and our infrastructure. There is considerable stress in our finances. Something considerable must change for the long-term health of Manatee County government. Thank you. That concludes my remarks. Be happy to answer any questions you might have. The next meeting will be next Wednesday. You will be receiving the budget fund summary, and we will take you through each of the many funds that fund this county government that, when added together, make up the total budget. We'll take you through the general fund, the MSTU fund, the transportation trust fund, and all the various funds to show you the revenues that come into each fund, the proposed expenses in each of those funds, the reserves in each of those funds, for you to get a better sense of the funds before we take you through the departmental budgets, the constitutional officers' budgets, the capital improvement program, and then the public hearings that are scheduled for the evening of the 16th. So again, I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioner Whitmore.
Can you help me? I kind of lost it at this point. Page 3 at the very bottom, explain, it starts with the second debt issue with the establishment, if you want to look at mine, Ed, with a $36 million credit line, and then you went on, and can you explain that again? And then on to the next page. It's about 44th, because I know you have a different, keep going.
Well, we have a,
It's this part I wanted you to explain.
on page,
3, and then it goes to 4, about the Southwest tip
oh,
and the 44th and the 36 million. That's the second debt issuance that we took.
okay.
Just do it like slowly or in layman's terms.
About a month ago, the board authorized a $36 million line of credit. And that line of credit for the 44th Avenue project will help us finish the design and engineering for that project. Once we complete that, we'll be ready to go to the construction phase. When we go to the construction phase, we will take out the line of credit and we will replace it with a bond issue.
Okay.
The reason we didn't do a bond issue initially is because the Internal Revenue Code requires you to spend the bond proceeds in a prescribed period of time. They call it the temporary period, which is usually a 3-year period. We don't know how long it's going to take to finish the design and permitting of the 44th Avenue project. You know, that's 2 bridges. We have one to cross the river and one to cross the interstate. But soon as we finish those, we know for certain that we're ready to go to construction. We'll know for certain how fast we can move on the construction. And then we'll replace that $36 million with a bond issue that we think that could be up to $99 million based on where we are today to do the final construction of the roadway, to build the 2 bridges, and to connect to 44th Avenue on the east side of the interstate.
And what will pay for that on that the last part you
That will
wrote,
all be paid
impact
for
fees.
with impact fees at this point in time from the southeast impact fee zone. That's what it's scheduled to do. And as we stated with the discussion at the last board meeting, we anticipate all of the impact fee revenues that we collect to be needed to pay that debt service, but we don't know until we get to the point of doing the bidding for the road construction to know the actual cost of the road construction, to know how much money we need to borrow. And once we know how much we need to borrow, we'll know what the debt service is. We'll know what the interest rate is at that point in time, and then we'll know what the annual debt service is, so we'll know how much it's going to take of the impact fees to retire that debt before we put any other project into the impact fee program for the southeast zone.
And my last thing, last year, we had set a percent, and you had gone during summer break, and I think it was 8% then. And then it came back, and the amount of revenue decreased. Today in the paper, you wrote, you're doing this all in projections of 9%. Today in the paper, I think it said 8%.
8.8.
8.1.
8.8.
Okay, or 8 point,
That is the
8.16.
property appraiser is required to provide the board a preliminary estimate on June 1 and a final estimate on July 1. The preliminary estimate for June 1 was 8.8, real close to our 9% number. We're going to wait to see what the July 1 number is before we change our 9% number to the specific number that he comes up with, that we're required to use in balancing the budget. So we'll make those adjustments before the July 15th
and last
presentation
year
of the
you
board.
had to decrease your
Yes.
projected budget when we came back and got the true numbers that I think the public needs to know that. We had to
Yes.
rework it. Okay, thanks, that's all I have.
Commissioner Benak.
Yeah, and I asked this question before, but on the sheriff's budget, we're proposing 8 additional deputies.
Yes.
How many additional deputies did we fund any last year?
No.
There
No, we're
was-
not.
We're doing a schedule we had gotten a request to do a schedule out, and we'll provide for you the.
There were no
But
additional
none less.
deputies last year.
Okay, so no additional deputies last year. I know that we had granted some additional funds the year before, and I don't remember if they went for additional deputies or not.
That was the 1.2 we had extra.
Yeah, because with the increase in the budget that we had there, some of the funds had gone.
Right.
My recollection is they'd gone primarily to public safety. I wasn't sure of the exact allocation of who they went to.
Yes. Over the years of the recession, any increases were in the public safety arena. We had some increases for 911 call takers. Last year, we had an increase for an EMS unit. But it's all been in the public safety arena.
Okay. But there's not been any cuts to the sheriff's department in the past 2 years. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then, so 8 additional deputies are being proposed in this budget, and 8 additional SROs partially funded. Who funds the rest of that?
School board.
School board. Have they put that in their budget?
One would hope.
Okay. Okay.
But if it's not in their budget, then we can't.
Well,
If I'm,
it was a request from Dr. Green, and I assume, I haven't seen her budget
Oh.
to date.
Okay.
But she requested, and I'm assuming she's going to do her half if we do our half.
Okay.
and if I'm not
We'll
mistaken,
know, but when July, when we finalize that budget for the August 2nd meeting, we'll certainly know by then.
last year, the sheriff put additional, his deputies, he was thinking he might get a grant, I think, if I'm not mistaken, last year.
And it didn't
It didn't-
happen.
it didn't work,
happen.
no.
Okay, I do remember that.
Okay.
And then on the property appraiser, I know the property appraiser sent us all his budget. I hadn't looked at it as of this morning. Is this consistent with his budget at this time?
If I may.
Yes.
Yes, we've coordinated with Cindy Capps from the property appraiser's office. So Cindy and I are in sync with what's within your budget.
Great. And then on the healthcare side, this is kind of just staying the course where we are today, basically what we've been funded, about 6.9 million, is that correct?
Yes.
which, as I say continuously, is amazing compared to what we have in our adjacent communities, Hillsborough and Sarasota, which are many multiple times that, and we're only able to do that because of our incredible partners, like Turning Points, that have been able to pull in a lot of private funding, grants, and are doing an amazing job of helping folks that, now they just, with our help, are starting this program to deal with chronic diseases like diabetes. So it's an amazing thing. Even though we put aside some funding, it's nothing compared to Sarasota, which is, I don't know.
Well,
57
if
million.
you want to talk about Sarasota, then let's talk about it. But they have an ad valorem tax.
Right.
So if we did that on healthcare, we'd probably have 24 million that we could put into healthcare every year too.
Yeah, and I'm really just trying to clarify because people get all nervous when they see that we're providing some money for healthcare, but we do that because we're able to partner with these private organizations, create a whole lot of services for very little money compared to our neighbors that do have dedicated funding source. So we're not creating a new dedicated funding source. We're not asking for a new tax for healthcare. We're able to keep the fund relatively low and keep, creating some innovative things like our community paramedic, which is going to really provide a lot of healthcare for folks that are now getting it in the emergency room. We're going to stop that. And Turning Points with the chronic diseases, which are keeping people out of the emergency room, so keeping costs down. So I just think it's important that we keep continuing to explain that when we talk about the budget for healthcare, because people
You're right. The
see it as something they didn't vote for that, but we're able to pay for it at such a rate that is so much lower than our neighbors that it makes a lot of sense.
The Sarasota County number is in the $40 million range. The Pinellas County number is in the $30 million range. And the Hillsborough County number at a full half-cent sales tax is in excess of $110 million.
It probably insures every resident in that county.
They have 1 million, don't they, in Hillsborough? Yeah.
All right, let's see, Commissioner DeSabatino.
A couple questions. Are we going to have any other presentations today?
No.
No.
This-
I just have some questions, and we just got all this, so I didn't have any chance to go over it ahead of time.
Tell us where you go.
So I'm just going back to your summary of the budget, which is very in-depth. Appreciate that. So in a nutshell, you were saying 16.5 million additional based on that 9% figure. Is that correct?
Correct.
Where are you, Robin, or just notes?
the budget
Okay,
summary.
I
Okay.
said 15 million. so
16.5?
I wrote down 15 million, so I'd like that
Wait a minute,
clarified.
let's get it right.
If I may, the
Yeah.
15 million difference is the difference in the net budget. That includes the entire, all funds.
Right.
When you're talking about the 16.5 million increase, that's just in the property tax revenue. I know the numbers are close, but it's two totally different things.
But out of that, we had just automatically deduct 4% off of that, correct? So that 9 million that you're going off of for increases of 9%, we're across the board, off the top, dedicating 4% to salary increases, is that correct? So we're left with 5%? Just to reallocate? Is that correct?
I don't think those are different percentages to different numbers. I don't know that the 4% subtracts from the 9% increase. The salary increase of, the 4% salary increase is 4% of the salary amount is added back in. So it's 4% of salaries, not 4% of the tax increase.
Okay. And, let's see. So, regarding the sheriff's budget, and I know we'll be getting into that at a later date, but since he is here today, I see them back there. And we had received a report from him back on April 29th, and that addressed a lot of issues and how many personnel he was asking and for different things. So between his ask and what you're recommending, is there any discrepancy or difference that he's not going to get funded of what he asks for and or needs?
Yes, and when he makes his presentation to you, I'm sure he'll point out the differences. There's, when he made his request, there was the health insurance had not been determined yet, and the SROs had not been determined yet. He had other requests that we weren't able to meet. So the whole difference between his request and what's in the recommended budget, we will provide to you before or during the presentation of the sheriff's budget when the constitutionals come before the board. I believe that's on the 15th of the month of June.
Okay, because I'm looking at his report that I brought with me on page two of his report. He was requesting 12 road deputies and 2 sergeants. I don't know if that's still his ask, because you're recommending 8. So is that, so that needs to be discussed further going on, because it looks like he's requesting a total of 14, and we're recommending 8.
I'm sure he will let you know that on the 15th.
Okay, and then at that point, he was also, I think I saw about this resource on page 5. He hadn't included any school resource officers in the budget. The Manatee School Board had not notified us or him if funds were going to be available for new resource officers. So I don't know if that, again, has been answered by the school board. I'll have some other questions in a little bit. Thank you.
All right, it's my turn now. Ed, I know that there's been a lot of talk about a sales tax referendum, and I know that this board has not determined how we're going to move forward with that, but I would suspect that we'll have to look at it soon. My question is, however, in looking at just what you've presented today, if the sales tax doesn't go through, are you going to be changing this budget to cover other things? Or, have you covered road repair the way you need to and the sheriff's department? And adding to that, and I know that you have a 20% on each department, I believe, to try and carry us over, but are we going to be putting any money back into the budget stabilization fund for the next recession coming down the road, since we generally get them every 10 years or so? What are we looking at with all that?
This budget does not contemplate a sales tax passage, nor a failure of a sales tax. This budget contemplates business as we know it today. If a sales tax initiative were to be put on the ballot, I'm not so sure how much this budget would change at all. We haven't included any projects in here. It is all related to, as the Citizens Budget Restructuring Committee labeled it, how do we maintain the assets that we've built with impact fees over the years? We used to be able to rely on property taxes to maintain those assets. We can no longer rely on them to do that. So what is it that we're going to do to maintain the roads, the parks, the public safety needs? And absent another revenue source, there'll be a challenge to the Board of County Commissioners in 2018 as to how to meet that requirement.
Okay, one more question. I know that you've talked about a 4% raise for all employees, including the constitutionals. And I know last year in our meeting, we had talked about how the county employees were being hit with compression, and it was going to cost approximately $3 million to get us out of that. And I believe the year before, I'm not sure about last year, no, I'm not sure, but I know the year before, we had tried to help the sheriff's department deal with compression, and I'm hoping that that has continued. But is there any, any idea on trying to handle the compression issue for the county employees, other than the 4%?
There is $500,000 for the compression issue.
Okay, good. Glad to hear that.
For us or for the
For the
For, I'm
employees.
sorry, for the county or the sheriff's department? Or
County.
both?
County.
The county, okay.
They haven't had
All
one.
right, well, that's a step in the right direction.
It's actually detailed in your Exhibit A, and there's a paragraph about compression.
Good, good.
Yay.
I'm glad to hear that.
Good question.
All right, Commissioner Whitmore?
Just, I think it needs to be stated, we have not raised our millage in 10 years. And that can't be said enough for how fiscally prudent this board has been. Of course, we had the recession, but, a mayor called me last night, about 9 o'clock actually, and talking about other issues, and I said, do you realize that we haven't raised our taxes? I didn't realize it was 10, I thought it was 9 years. I go, how many cities have raised their millage? And I think maybe all but one. And how many fire departments have raised theirs? So I think, we don't get enough credit for how hard this has been not to raise the millage. But when people saying their taxes are going up, they're not going up from us. The property values go up, and you have to do the Save Our Homes deal. We all understand that. But it doesn't go unsaid that this commission has worked very hard not to raise taxes in 10 years. The millage, not taxes, millage.
Just don't do
The,
it.
Have to clarify it.
The Citizens Committee looked at one of the solutions to your 2018 problem is an increase in property taxes. They didn't think politically or the community would accept that increase to solve the problem. The problem being, how much does it cost to maintain the assets for public safety, transportation, roads, parks, libraries? How much does it cost to maintain those? And how much would you have to raise property tax to meet that? And that's why they recommended the sales tax approach, which brings in $27 million, $27 million. And that to do that in property taxes, well, and when they looked at property taxes, one of the analysis they looked at was 1/3 of the people are already paying 2/3 of the bill. And you'd be going back to that 1/3 and ask them to even pay more. And again, they thought in the world of spreading the cost over a larger group of payers, that was the sales tax was the better option. A, it brought in money to solve the problem, and B, it spread the cost over a larger group of payors.
And Madam Chair, you had brought this up and instructed the county administrator, and the board supported it. And when I was upstairs yesterday, I saw staff working on it. They are coming up with a very, very detailed list with projected cost of if that did happen, what exactly the taxpayers, the sales tax would pay for, because you're correct. People want us to be transparent. And I saw that you've tasked your departments on infrastructure, not just some fake number. They are actually getting down to the nitty-gritty so the taxpayers exactly know what, where, and when you're planning on repairing some of these roads, this cul-de-sacs, this, the drain, the outfall drains, the stuff that we haven't been able to do except 5-year plans. So I saw that they were working on that, and it's good for the people if this goes or doesn't go, it's good for them to know what they're paying for, and they expect that now.
Well,
We-
I'm sorry, it should be noted that this board will not vote to increase a sales tax or millage. If
Totally.
it's done, it will be done by the people themselves.
Right.
They will choose to do that, not us.
Well, I know, but you had asked that it be
I
transparent.
just wanna make sure
No,
that we
all
made
know
that very clear.
Oh, very clear. We know that.
Yeah. Okay. Commissioner Benak.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, the 9% is the estimated increase in the property tax value. That doesn't mean we're getting, as been pointed out, that we're getting all of those funds. So it was a little bit confusing when Rum was talking about the 4% from the 9%, but the 9%, that doesn't mean we get all that money, is that correct?
No, well, 8.8 is the increased revenue that we will receive according to the property appraiser.
So far.
So after Save Our Homes, that is the 8%?
Yes.
Okay, I stand corrected.
That was,
Okay.
that includes
Oh, after.
the homesteaded property tax payers only having a 0.7 increase.
Right, right.
So homesteaded will only pay 0.7. We'll get an overall increase of 8.8.
Okay.
There's a lot of new construction out there. There's a lot of non-homesteaded properties that are going up in value. And that's why we're getting the 8.8 or what we forecast is 9% increase.
Okay, so but the property values, do you know what they're going up by? I mean, I don't really even know what that number is.
No,
I also-
everybody's
We can get it
different.
for you.
Okay, and I wanted to clarify on the sheriff ask. The sheriff ask from the letter I have is 22 additional deputies and 15 additional civilians. That's what's listed in the letter that we received, so it is significantly different, so. Okay, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. County Administrator, under the sheriff budget, your recommendation is 8 additional deputies, correct?
Yes, sir.
And 8 additional SROs, we're splitting that half with the school board?
Yes, sir.
That's what you're saying? Is that additional to total 16, though?
Yes.
Okay. The 4% raise that you are recommending across for the constitutional officers in Manatee County government, how did you come to the 4%? I know we did 4% last year.
Yes.
It's a couple of years. yeah.
We looked at the money available. We looked at what other counties are doing. We have a consultant that we retain that talks about what's happening in the marketplace. And we take all that information together to come up with a recommendation in the budget.
But it's not 4% across the board, it's not done that way, right?
No, ours under the county administrator is pay for performance. Each of the constitutional officers can use that 4% however they choose. Some could do it across the board. They could do it however they want to do it. Ours is on a pay for performance.
Commissioner DeSabatino?
I wasn't finished, Mr. Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, you didn't say anything to her.
Well, I don't yell like she does. She yells.
Come on now.
I'll yield to the Commissioner
Go
Smith.
ahead, go ahead.
Thank
I-
you,
I
Didn't
apologize.
say anything to her. I get it
Thank you,
now,
Mr. Chair.
after the fact.
The 4% that we're recommending for the constitutional officers, will there be any type of public presentation? Or have you want to ask for one this year?
We have requested
Yes.
that the constitutionals attend the 15th of June work session and present their budgets to the Board of County Commissioners.
Okay, and the reason I'm asking you this, I talked about it last year. I am not saying they don't need the 4%, but it's very difficult to explain to the public how all of a sudden you just give 4% raises without a presentation publicly, where the public can't come and ask a question about that constitutional officer. I mean, the sheriff is here every year, and I think the public has a right to come here and question it, whether we agree with them or not. But I have serious problems with increasing 4%, and there's no presentation. I'm not saying I wouldn't support it, but I believe the public should have a right to question constitutional officers based on that 4%. In fact, that's mostly the only time they can address them, is in a public forum when it comes budgetary time. So certainly I would like to see that put in place.
We will
I know we
reemphasize.
can't make them, but I don't have to support the 4% either, though.
Yes, sir.
In other words.
Are you done yet?
Thank you, Madam.
They
Um,
would be.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner DeSabatino.
Finish. I had to run to the ladies' room, but I thought I heard Commissioner Ball say, and maybe the clerk can read it back, that this board will not be voting on a sales tax and ad valorem, the public will? Is that what was said?
What
What
she
was-
was
what was
talking
said?
about was,
There.
if it gets on the ballot, then it would be the people that would make the decision,
But the,
not the Board of County Commissioner. The only thing the Board of County Commissioner will be doing is deciding whether or not to put it on the ballot.
Right.
In November.
but didn't I hear ad valorem?
I don't know.
I heard that.
yeah,
Might
I
have
was
been flushing the
stated.
toilet then.
No, it was
It was
before that.
stated.
She's hearing. She can hear us. She'll be here in a second.
You can read it back.
She'll be
Can you
right
read it
back.
back?
She'll be right back.
You can't read it
Here
back?
she comes.
If somebody wants to know what I said, I
Yeah.
can repeat it.
See,
Did you say, the board will not be voting on a sales tax and ad valorem?
I said we would not be voting to increase ad valorem or not, not ad valorem, but
You said ad
millage
valorem.
or, well, excuse me, I'm sorry.
That's millage.
Okay. Let me help you.
Gotcha.
We will not be voting to increase the sales tax. That will be up to the people to decide.
Okay.
That is what I was saying.
Okay, I want to make
But
it
thank you
sure.
for making sure I'm correct.
Because I heard ad valorem, and the taxpayers don't vote on that. We vote on the ad valorem.
Thank you. Continue.
I just wanted to clarify for the record that.
I know.
When you said, I thought you were making a statement from all
Robin,
seven
please
of.
continue.
I
You've
am.
corrected it now, so go
No,
ahead.
I
Move
assume.
forward.
You were making a statement that none of us will be voting on any increase in the ad valorem, and that's not up to one person, that's up to
Okay.
all seven.
Saying, was I not?
Any referendum that goes on the budget, that has to, what's our drop dead date on that? I have a couple questions, Madam Chair.
August something.
Any, for the property taxes?
No, property taxes don't go on the
No.
referendum. The referendum in relationship to any
Sales tax?
sales tax increase.
Well, I think that would be the 21st of this month would be a date, the latest date to get something in front of the supervisor of election is the 22nd or 23rd of August.
Of August. Okay, so in order for something to go, just reiterating that for my own edification, that in order for that, any referendum to go on for the supervisor, that is August when?
22nd, he said.
22nd. Okay, so, so the drop dead date for that is not the June 21st meeting. It can be on there, but it doesn't have to be.
Correct.
Because, again, I said this morning, I will not be here unfortunately on the 21st, so if you're going to be voting on it, then I won't be able to vote. Okay. How much money bringing out of our reserves is being utilized to balance this current budget? Our budget
Which fund?
stabilization money, or whatever you want to call it.
For general fund, it's roughly 14, I believe.
I think it's roughly 14 million.
Okay, so we're taking 14 out of reserves, but we're also bringing in money.
How
Okay.
much? I forgot. I'll look.
So, I'm just asking.
I don't understand the question.
We're bringing in 15 million.
Bringing in 15, but spending 14.
Oh, I see.
Um,
It's 14 million for general.
I don't have it.
Okay.
Also, I had asked the, bless you.
This is
I
outdated.
had asked the sheriff, and I don't know if they copied everyone else, but I can give it to the clerk to copy. What he needs as the differential that I asked earlier and what that would equate to. And so I don't know if this is up to date. This was as of yesterday. The total money needed for additional staffing the sheriff is requesting is 3.651, 127, but 886 can come from impact fees. So the net from property taxes is 2.764. So I don't know if that 2.764 is in addition to what's being recommended to fund the sheriff.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Thank
we
you, I
don't-
was going to do that.
We don't have anything that she's reading, so I'm totally lost.
Well, this-
I
this
think
was-
if the sheriff wants to give all the commissioners that information, it would be most helpful.
Well, he and the.
Letter, is this something else that you're referring
He
to?
sent us a budget letter. Is it something else?
No, the budget letter. This was sent
Talking about
yesterday.
yesterday.
From Mr. Salisbury, copied the sheriff and copied Jan Brewer, so the county had a copy of this yesterday.
Sorry, I think all the commissioners need that, so we'll
Okay.
know what we're talking
I'll
about.
share it with you, but I just want to go over,
But it's confusing though, Robin, because I'm not getting it, sorry. If I had it in front of
I
us-
understand.
Give it to the
I have-
clerk and have her make copies for all of us.
Sure, I will, but I just have the floor for one more minute. And you know, when I go around to ask my different communities if they would opt to spend more money because we vote on this for public safety and extra patrolling, and unanimously, they're saying yes. So just for instance, a household value of $150,000, and you have $50,000 in exemptions, so that's a net of $100,000. To fund his additional ask of 2.7 would be $9.71 for the year.
Lost.
So I'm just throwing it out there.
Verify that.
Yes, me.
I'll give you all a copy.
Is that on, are you just talking about increasing the millage? Is that what
I'm
you're
just,
referring to?
I'm just saying, to fund
But
his
is that what you're
budget.
talking about?
I'm just
don't have
making
it
a
here in front of
statement.
me.
I'm just making a statement.
I have
So
a problem
Jan
with you
Brewer
making a
has it.
statement
She
that
can
can't
forward
use
it
it.
to everyone.
Yeah, I don't think we're talking
I
about
don't think
increasing
you-
the millage, are we?
I didn't say one word. I just said 3.6 million.
Madam Chair,
Equates
can we
to
move on with our agenda, please?
Yes, can we move on,
$9.71
please?
for the year. You know, I don't interrupt you all, so I expect that in return. Thank you.
Commissioner Benak.
Sometimes you do, but not a lot.
Yeah, I just, again, want to clarify what information we do have from the sheriff that we're all looking at.
No,
April
I-
29th, 2016, I just sent it to the clerk's office because she said she didn't have a copy of it, but I did ask for it to be emailed to me. It was emailed to all of us. Or it was a hard
budget
copy,
letter.
hard copy. The budget letter was given to all of us. I asked, y'all got a hard copy, and I asked Mary Ann to email
why I
it to
thought
me
you
last
would
night.
forward
So can I talk? I asked her to
You know how
email
it
to
feels. Thank
me.
you.
Yeah, I asked her to email it to me, so I would have it up on the screen. And the proposed budget is an increase of $7,020,000 over current budget year, which equates to 6.5%. So is that what you're talking about, Robin, or is it something else other than the 7 million that you're talking about in your presentation? Is that the number, what was in the letter that we all received April 29th, or is it something different?
It's multifaceted because the letter that we're all looking at, that was April 29th of this year,
With the 7 million.
that was, I'm sure, probably prior to the sheriff meeting with the county administrator. So what I asked in the beginning is the amount of money that the county administrator is recommending, how much different is that from this? And what does he need to be whole to make sure that our 336,000-ish residents, I don't see the number jumping, 369 residents are safe and protected. Thank you.
Feel lost. Sorry.
Well,
Sorry.
I think I'm still up, right?
Yeah, you are.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, and as I said, the numbers are significantly different in the letter that we got on the 29th, because it had 22 additional deputies. We're recommending 8, also had 15 additional civilian positions. I don't think we're recommending them. It does get, when you try to figure out the numbers, it gets a little bit confusing, because in his budget request, it does include some things that we are allocating, like the 4% increase and some of the funds that are coming out of impact fees. So my takeaway from this is there is a much bigger ask from the sheriff than what's being recommended now. Big delta, if you will, between what is being proposed and what is being requested. But if I heard correctly, we're going to hear from the sheriff about that at some point, if not today.
Sheriff, go
Chair.
ahead.
Well,
Madam Chair, Commissioners, Mr. Hunzeker, for just a point of clarification, Mr. Hunzeker and his staff and my staff met, and I can't give you the dates. We talked about the budget. After that meeting, I then put out my budget letter that you're reading with our request. And then I want to say a week to 10 days ago, Commissioner DeSabatino asked my office what the millage increase would be for the numbers in reference to my letter. I had Tom Salisbury talk with Jan Brewer at the county, so they came up with the figures, and those figures were only given and finalized this morning and was then emailed to Commissioner DeSabatino. So where we stand now, I had a conversation with Mr. Hunzeker and Jan this morning based on what his recommendation to you in my budget was going to be. So now we need time between June 15th for our presentation, so Tom and I and my staff can go back and look at what it is that he's requesting that we can have versus what it is that I believe that we need to go forward. So does that help you?
Thank you.
yeah, okay.
Commissioner Whitmore.
And thanks, Sheriff. Stay, for 1 second, respectfully stay, Sheriff. The email, whatever, can somebody forward it to us, because that would help us. So what it is, and some of us did vote for a millage increase last year to try to make, accommodate some of the public safety, and it didn't fly, and that's fine. But it'd be nice for us to have in the packet. And I just have a question. I know we're going to get into it. Is this all, whatever you talked to about Ed, are you still doing this helicopter, that some of this money's still going for that helicopter that I know it's going to take a couple years for us to pay for it, the new one?
We've put some of the money that's been returned to
Last year.
us each year for the last 2 years
Okay.
into a fund the county has for us. And depending on the monies that we're able to save in this current budget year, I'm hoping to put that. But then added to that information is if the half-cent sales tax passes, there'll be an opportunity there as part of the capital improvement plan and the helicopter and all the other things that go along with that. So,
Good, okay.
I mean, I don't want to muddy those waters either at
No,
this
no.
point.
Yeah, and that's,
No, yeah, just that information would help us all. Thank you. If
Well,
somebody would forward it to us.
Jan
Okay.
Brewer has it, and she can email it to
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Commissioner Bennett.
yeah, and just like the sheriff said, I mean, just like we just got this information on what is being proposed by the administration at this time, they just got it, and it may not be totally what the email said, because this is all new information, and they need time to look at what's being proposed, because it's more than just positions. There's other funding, so I would hesitate for any of us to jump on any information that we're getting at piecemeal. I think that,
Thank
like
you.
the sheriff said, they want to take a look at this and see what's being proposed. And, we all want to be totally transparent, and, the sheriff has done a great job of that and laid it all out, and now we have what the county administrator's proposing. So before we get to, how this would impact a ad valorem revenue, I think we need some time to balance those numbers out. And I see the sheriff nodding, so I just would caution us all to try to, give it the time. We've got the schedule, and so take that time to figure it out, to see where we are.
Correct. We need to reconcile between the two.
Reconcile, that's a good word.
And
Reconcile.
I would ask that, especially during, the budget is probably one of the hardest things that we do, year-round, in trying to figure out where to put the little bit of monies that we have that we're working with. And I would request that any department, if there's something going on as far as monies, that's being discussed with the budget or something, please copy all commissioners so that we all have the same information. Because it takes 4 votes up here, and that's not always an easy task when we're talking about the budget. So we all need to make sure that we all have the same information moving forward. Commissioner Whitmore.
Just one last thing. When when Ed and I came in November of 2006, the budget was 670 million, something around there. And this new budget is 567 million. So again, to not stress enough, we haven't raised taxes or millage in 10 years, and the budget was 670 million when we started. So again, everybody's been pretty prudent on managing the money of the county.
Commissioner Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the time that everything is on the table. There's no limitation with conversations, and we have a responsibility to call any constitutional officer, no matter who it may, and ask for information. Staff can do it, but certainly any additional information I get will be helpful to me, with this being my second budgetary process as a county commissioner. The things, and I may call some constitutional officers myself for clarity and questions, or talk to staff from that standpoint, but hey, everything's on the table. We don't know what we're going to decide on, what the budget may actually be, what we're going to support, and it's the only time that we can debate it in a public forum. And I just wanted to put that on the record, Madam Chair.
Make sure we all have it, so we'll know what to do. I don't have anyone else on the board at this time, so I'll go ahead and open this to public comment. If there's anyone in the public that would like to come forward, please come on up here and state your name. Welcome, Ms. Grant.
My name's Kathleen Grant. I just have a few quick questions. One, with respect to the 4% increase, if I understand that correctly, that's kind of across the board, so every department gets 4%, so that assumes there's the same amount of pay compression in every department and every office? Is that correct?
No.
So every department or every office, constitutional office, does not get 4%
No,
increase?
everybody gets 4%. I didn't say the pay compression was the same in each organization, but
But the
everybody-
reason for the 4% is because of pay compression, right?
No.
Haven't had a
Okay.
raise in.
Please
It
explain.
is to remain competitive within the marketplace for our workforce.
Okay, but you're assuming then that all offices are equally uncompetitive. In other words, one office may really need 6% to be competitive, while another is already competitive. But the way the budget is drafted, it's 4% for everybody. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. I think that needs to be reviewed. The next question I have is, you pointed out that there's a 60,000 increase in the population since 2007. I'm wondering how many additional deputies have been hired in response to that 60,000 population increase?
I don't have that answer.
Okay. Then the other thing I see, you said the property tax increase of 8.8% was net of the Save Our Homes exemption. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, well, I see that there's an 8.8% increase in property taxes, but unless I misunderstood the numbers, there's a 4.6% increase in the sheriff's budget. So that seems to me a bit of an anomaly that I don't understand as a citizen. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public that would like to come forward? You can both do it.
Catherine Edwards. Again, on the 4% pay raise. It'd be nice to see maybe that pay raise prorated, with the highest percentage going to the employees making the least, and not providing a pay raise for anybody over $75,000. The COLA for retirees for 2015 was 0. There may be pay compression, but if retirees have to live on a COLA as calculated by the federal government, I do understand how a 4% pay raise can be justified. Regarding the infrastructure sales tax, that infrastructure sales tax does not address operating expenses. I'd be curious to know what the county is recommending to cover the operating expenses. The CFSAB did not go for MSTUs or GO bonds. So is the county going to be considering additional GO bonds and MSTUs to help in that regard? On the sheriff's 29th April report that the commissioners had, would it be possible for the sheriff's office to post that online or otherwise make it available to the public in general? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gee, we don't get a welcome. Hi, y'all. This is Linda Neely, Citizens, and we're here doing our constitutional right to lecture this body. I never get to see any of you in the grocery store, or the library, or at the gas station, to have any brief chats with you, regretfully. Don't know where you shop, but it's not where I go. So I'm here to help you.
See? Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Go ahead and interrupt. It's common on this board. But, the budget. On the Bill O'Reilly show, he presented a presentation that almost 74% of the people making $50,000 a year have no access to $1,000 for an emergency. He reported shockingly that people that make up to $100,000 a year, 40% of them had no access to $1,000 for an emergency. So you talk about pay compression and the problems of the county. You know what, out there in the real world with those people that are making their mortgages and paying their taxes, and they're $50 possibly away from losing their job because they blow a tire on their car. And do you ever think about them? And that penny, that half-cent sales tax that you're all slathering to get, and yes, you are slathering to get that money, because that money allows you to have a collateral point to borrow more money for our safety and welfare. I think that we need to pay as we go in this county, and you're so worried about this, save our homes, yet our property appraiser somehow made private entities out at the port, government entities, and failed to charge them ad valorem taxes, and you aren't complaining about that. You were happy that those taxes didn't get collected. Those are facts. Anybody want to stop me on that one? Would you like to interrupt? We all know what happened. And those taxes didn't get started collecting until last year's 2015. They had to pay them in pay their fee in 2016. So it kind of annoys me a little bit when we are presented out here in the public in the wilds that we don't do enough for the board. We don't do enough for the county employees. You know what? Everybody in this county pretty much takes care of your right-of-way in front of their property. They mow it every week. They don't get an appreciation, thank you. They do mow it, folks. You don't send a crew out there. My business is on Whitfield. They used to come by like maybe every 6 months. They've made a more concerted effort to mow the right-of-way out there, but it's still doesn't look like it's maintained. So, and then as to the sheriff and to your capital accounts, your policy to not have the sheriff investigate vandalism on county property is disgraceful. I have the letter from your legal department. You don't. So when you're making these decisions, think about the people you voted you to hold our future in your hands. Try that. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Come on up. Welcome, Mr. Marshall. It's good to see you.
I'm 16, you say?
No, I said it's good to see you.
I wish I was. No, I don't either. I
Me
don't want to
too.
go back to
16 is
it.
a compliment.
No, I just turned 80. I'm in competition with that young man on the end right there. Sandy Marshall, First Vice President of the Federation of Manatee County Community Associations. First of all, I want to thank the efforts of staff, Mr. Hunziker and his group, for putting together a nice succinct report on the State of the Union, so to speak, from the budget standpoint. As you know, the Federation has participated, thankfully, through Mr. Hunziker's efforts to include these workshops that you're going to have. And as you know, we put together a report that we turn over to the commission when we have a chance to sit in on those and weigh in on what's being said. There's a couple of important things going on, and we need to keep an eye on this. We're looking at the budget today, but I just went to a meeting last night at the library on the new land development code. And there is a letter that was sent to the board. I don't know if you've gotten copies of it. It was mailed out last week to the Board of County Commissioners from the Federation, signed by Jim Kaiser and myself as First Vice President. If you hadn't gotten that, you need to get it, because it has some very key things in there of what to do to help raise money. I don't know if you ever got it or not, did you, Ed? I will see to it one's fax to you, but the rest of you, it was sent to the office here, and I don't know what happened with distribution of it, but you should get that, because it talks about how to raise more money to keep from having to pay more property taxes, whether you talk about Save Our Homes or anything else. Very key stuff in there. There's also, in the land development code, there's an opportunity to create a basis upon which there can be monies paid by new people moving here. And it refers to the concept that's used out at Lakewood Ranch. Mr. Jensen, Rex Jensen, and his people had the foresight to go ahead and decide on their own to build roads out there, pay for different types of amenities they needed on an annual basis through taxing districts. They call them something else, but it's the same concept. That needs to be put into every subdivision that is platted in this county hereafter, by putting it in your land development code, that they have to provide, the developers have to provide a taxing district so that they can derive income from those people if they want new ambulances, new deputies, new libraries, new whatever's out there on an annual basis, not just impact fees. Impact fees won't do it alone. So look at that letter. The last thing is this. On your Save Your Homes, and I don't know the answer to this, the Save Our Homes concept, is that retroactive to somebody that buys an old home? Let's say they're on the tax rolls at $100,000. They sell it for $200,000. Now, does that $100,000 level for taxation under Save Our Homes, does that inure to the new buyer? Or does the valuation jump up to $200,000 and you're able to tax at that level?
Yes.
Is that how it is? It's transferred?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, what?
Goes up.
Goes up, okay. Now, there hasn't been any figures released to you, and you need to see that. What are the figures showing of our homes that are resold, and how that value jumped, and how much of that increase in tax money or that we're receiving because new buyers buy old homes? The people that are already here that haven't sold them, they're still taking advantage of SOH. But the new people coming in are not. And I don't see any figures being put out as to what that represents. So those are the comments that I had that I wanted to bring to your attention. So,
Thank you,
thank you.
sir.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Dimitri Dennis.
I'm sorry, can you get a
Oh, I
little,
apologize. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Dimitri Dennis. I'm a resident here in Manatee County, not too long. But when I walk around in my community, I talk to a lot of the millennials and the younger population who don't mind working and paying the taxes and playing a part in building the community. I would just like to see, despite if you go through with the 4%, for the salary increases, that we also make sure that we create opportunities for those in the community, because there are a lot of young people in my community who are well-equipped for these competitive opportunities, but often feel disenfranchised. So I would just like to make sure that we dive into the community and also utilize the assets. Thank you.
thank you. Anyone else from the public like to come forward? No? Not seeing anyone. All right, we'll go back. I'll close public comment. Commissioner Smith.
I think Kathleen back there, she was asking that question, and that's why I had said what I said about the 4%. It'll be more clarity in here in a public forum, so her question would be answered by the constitutional officers. I'm not saying I wouldn't support the 4, but these the kind of questions that the public has a right to know from our constitutional officers on what she just asked. We don't know whether it's 2%, 5%, 6%, and it should be addressed right here in a public forum. So I definitely agree with what you're saying. And in the private sector, when you give someone an increase, you actually meet with that individual before you give it to them through evaluation. So to give a 4% increase without them publicly not coming here, requesting it and stating what she's asking publicly, yeah, we do have these issues. I have problems with that. And so those are the many phone calls that I received because they told me no one never asked that before publicly as a county commissioner for them to show up. And so I did last year. And you don't give raises. I'm used to with the city, every department head had to justify their increase in a public forum. The mayor kind of put it together, but it came to the public forum where we had questions because we don't know whether it should be 6%. We put a lot of strain on the county administrator by doing what he's doing. And he takes the heat for doing it, but I agree with what you're saying. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And on that note, Ed, correct, maybe I've got the wrong impression, but I'm under the impression that the monies go to each department and then the director meets with each employee. Is that correct?
We're just talking the 4% salary increase because the balance of the budget is made up of decision units that spell out in great detail the services that are rendered for a dollar amount available. And you will go through that in the coming weeks. The 4% salary increase is provided to each department. And in the department, the people doing the evaluations, and that goes from the department directors to the division directors to the section managers down to the first line supervisors. Those people doing the evaluations make the recommendations for what the salary increase should be for those that they evaluate. And that works its way through the department up to the department director, who takes all that information and correlates it together to make sure that they stay within the 4%. In the current year, the 4%, because it is effective in January, you can do from 0 to 5%, but you have to average 4. And every employee is evaluated based on their performance as documented in their evaluation. So the raise has to correlate to the words that were on your evaluation. And once we get those done and completed after September 30th, they all go to Human Resources. And in Human Resources, they take all of that information and they dice it and they slice it to make sure that, if you will, the boys don't get bigger raises than the girls, that managers don't get bigger raises than the rank and file, and they continue to slice and dice it so there's no anomalies that might embarrass the organization down the road, that it's fair and equitable across the board. And if there's any oddities in it, we address that before we announce who gets what in the way of raises. The announcement of the raises is usually shortly before the Christmas holidays, and the raises are effective in early January. But we make sure that those raises are fair and equitable across the organization, and they're based on performance, and there's no anomalies within the organization.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Benak.
Yeah, I just heard a couple things, and I was trying to send Catherine Edwards. It was an email. I had it emailed to me, so it's an email, so it can be forwarded to anybody, what the budget letter from the sheriff, so it is public record, so no big deal. I'll go ahead and email it to you. in regards to Linda Neely's comments, you know, honestly, the people that work for the county are not, in many, many regards, are your average people. It was really kind of hit me a weird way to hear her talk about average people out on the street and then the county people. Really, the people that drive a bus, they're not average people? How about the people that work over in transit? You know, these folks are not making a ton of money.
Floors.
So,
exactly.
sweeping floors, I mean, come
Janitors.
on, we let's not do that. Let's not say
love, so.
them and, you know, the sheriff deputies. I mean, these are your average Manatee County people, and they're struggling, just like everybody else, to try to pay their debts, to try to live here. I worked for the county for 11 years, started as an assistant planner, didn't make a whole lot of money. I'm sure they don't at that level even today. So it really kind of hit me the wrong way to listen to her talk about the real people.
We got $11.
I guess she's left. I also wanted to tell her my husband did get a chance to go to her store. She's got some great things for yard care out there. Found her on the internet. So yeah, again, let's not try to divide people. The fact of the matter is that we're trying to create a place where people feel good about working for Manatee County. And many of them are at the very, very low pay range, have to have 2 jobs to be able to afford to live here. So we are constantly looking at that. In regards to the Federation, I did happen to see, because I was at the meeting last night briefly, was standing in the back, and they had a copy of the letter, so that's how I got a chance to look at it at the meeting last night at the library, so I just looked over it. And, you know, one of the things that was being proposed is this idea of having community development districts for all neighborhoods, but I guess it's for all new neighborhoods, so it's kind of like all new neighborhoods have to pay, but any of us guys that are here, we're good. We don't have to pay for the property maintenance and for the upkeep of roads and for, you know, and I've said it before. I mean, this issue that somehow everybody knew, because the majority of our revenues, tax revenues, do come from new people. The new homes in Lakewood Ranch, they're the ones that are paying the big dollars toward the property revenues. Are they getting their fair share of services? Is that really where all the calls are going to for the sheriff? I would bet if you look into it, you would find that's not exactly true.
It's not.
That, in fact, the new people are in many ways subsidizing us guys that have been here for a long time. So I kind of out of hand say this idea that we're going to make everybody new coming here pay for us guys that have been here a long time. It's something we have to look at. It's something that our financial services group looked at, and they concurred that it's really kind of off balance. So where I think that I certainly understand the idea of CDDs paying for infrastructure for new communities, and they have done that. Matter of fact, Sarasota County at one time in their 2050 plan actually mandated community development districts in the 2050 plan that to make sure that infrastructure is paid for. The problem that we're having isn't paying for infrastructure per se, it's paying for the maintenance and the upkeep, and quite frankly, for some of the things the sheriff needs. It just, we've been a community for a long time that we've been able to keep our tax rate very low, which is great, but at some point it kind of catches up to you. And I think that's where we're going to be in 2018. So we've got to, we've got to deal with that. I understand today in today's budget we didn't, but I just, I know when we could talk about the budget, we have to be as clear and as, have as much open communication as possible. So I wanted to state that for the record.
Good points. Commissioner Whitmore.
I actually was a county employee. I don't ever think of it like that, from 77 to 85 at Manatee Hospital. And I saw some people when Ed was talking about the 4% and the raises, and I worked my tail off, and the person next to me would sit and be drinking coffee all day, and we all got paid the same thing. And that used to burn me more than anything. And I remember when I first came here, it was across the board. And then Ed came with pay for performance. And, you know, if there's some people out there, we've seen many people come before us at the dais be recognized that are going over and above what their job description is. They deserve the 4%. If you have some that are skating by, just collecting their paycheck, they're doing their job, do they deserve the 4%? I remember years ago, one of the hospital administrators gave me a 3%, and it could go up to 4, and I go, well, why did I get a 3? And I said, you know, I did this, because at the beginning of the year, you have to write your objectives and put it in an envelope and seal them, and then at the end of the year, you'd reveal it with your supervisor. And they said, yeah, you're doing your job, but you're not going over and above, you're just doing your job. So I think it's a more fair way. The 4%, we had to come up with a number. Not everybody in this county is getting a 4%, and I'm sure that staff or somebody here could tell us that we are absolutely telling you as a public the truth. But the outstanding people that are going above, there's people that saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars. We used to have a program where when they saved us money, we would recognize them. You know, they deserve their 4%. So for us, you know, 4% isn't a lot of money. But we have to be competitive because, as we know, look how many people we're losing that are going to the private sector. We hear every day that somebody's leaving, they got a job offered in the private sector. The gentleman that left about the millenniums, he needs to know that we have a program to encourage young employees to come and join us, and we're all getting tired. Our directors are out there, they want the young blood to come in. So that person, too bad he didn't stay, but we do offer that, and we encourage that. We even have an internship where we're working with Ron on various departments so that students can see how good, how diversified we are in Manatee County to get a job. So I just had to say that 4% is not a lot. It's very, very grueling how you get that 4%, and if you deserve it, you deserve it, and if you don't, you won't get it.
Commissioner DiSabatino.
Yeah, when you say 4% isn't that much, but then when you multiply it times 3,500
well, it
people,
is.
it's
But if you got
serious
one
change.
employee, it's nothing.
Right, yeah, for someone making 35,000,
Right.
it's only 1,400, but if you
Right.
multiply that times a lot of people, it's serious chump
3
change.
million, yeah.
And we've talked about before about new homes and new construction carrying the weight, and I understand that, but Sandy Marshall did point out in his group that resales, once someone purchases a property and now they start at that high level, and then if they do the Save Our Homes that following year, then that's capped. But to start with, they're paying much more than their neighbor that's been there for 5 years or whatever. And we do have the caveat that if you buy up, that was approved a couple years ago, if you buy up in a house, you port a base price and then you port it to the next house. So that's a way to kind of lessen that shock. And I was just curious, I'm sure this is probably like a no, but last year and the year before, when it's a discretion of each department head to give up to the 5% with a 4% average, were there any instances or anything to speak of where all that money wasn't allocated? And if that's not all allocated, how much wasn't allocated, and did that go back into the general fund?
Yes. It went back into the fund.
And how much? About probably peanuts.
Peanuts. It just rolls, if it's not spent, it rolls to the bottom line and goes back to the unspent money at the end of the year.
And then their budget
We've been doing this budgeting long enough that at the end of the year, as we get close to the end of the year, we forecast what we think the actual revenue will be at year end versus what we budgeted. And we are usually conservative in our budget estimates on revenue, and revenue will come in hopefully a bit higher than we estimated. That's overall revenue, including property taxes. And on the expenditure side, we're again conservative, and spending is usually less than we budget, and so there's a little left over. And the combination of those two will result in a year-end balance that gets carried forward into the next year. And that year-end balance is a number in each of the roughly 150 funds. We'll have a number that we project as part of the budget process. In this budget before you today is a number that we have estimated will be available at September 30th of 2016. As we get closer to the end of the year, we will adjust that number. It's a bit of a scientific guess based on a whole lot of years of doing this business that everybody won't spend every nickel, but the revenues will come a little bit higher. In all the years I've been doing this, I've never had a case where it came in the reverse.
Knock on wood. And regarding, when Sandy brought up the MSTUs and MSBUs, I think at least I discovered about a year or so ago that we have the power as the board to establish those MSTUs, MSBUs, and don't necessarily have to go out and survey the neighborhoods. Is that correct?
Correct.
So we have that power to look into areas that we know need our help in landscaping improvements and to look into that and get pricing. And we have the power to put that on their tax bill. And then when you average it out over hundreds of families, thousands of families per household, it comes down to not a lot of money per household. But again, then when you're multiplying it back, so it's economies of scale. So when we're doing, especially like in the TIF area where we're looking to beautify some areas, and I know you have a formula of kind of the more in need a district is, the less they have to have skin in the game, but some skin in the game. And then the more affluent areas would have more skin in the game than the county. So, we need to, and I know your staff is thin, but those are all options that we have to raise money for infrastructure that would be an extra income stream other than the county having to directly pay for it.
Correct.
And then those people in that area that pay for it have the benefit.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm next on the board, wow. I got to tell you, you're right. This board could look at a neighborhood and say, we're going to give you this new tax because we're going to landscape your area. And it would only be this amount of money because everybody's going to pay it. I got to tell you, you really should, and I'm sure you would, if it was in your district, you would go to that neighborhood and talk to them to see if it's something that they wanted. You wouldn't just arbitrarily put it on a neighborhood. I mean, I can tell you, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that without citizen input. We represent the people, and a lot of times people don't think we do a great job at it. And I got that, and I understand it, but at the same time, I think sometimes we do a good job at it. And I wouldn't be willing to tax people without talking to them first. So,
May I dialogue?
well, actually, let me continue. I'm not done. Getting back to employees. This county, we lost 300 employees during the recession. And the employees that were here, the majority of them didn't get a raise. In fact, some, their pay was decreased because of hospitalization cost. So they didn't get an increase, but they stayed with the county. And these are people, a lot of them that have been here for a long, long time. And if we lost them, we would know it because they give a lot to this county, to working for this administration. I know the sheriff, how many years since I was on the board, in 2012, came before us every year and talked always about how he was losing employees because they were going out to other counties where they could make more money. And we just, I think, have finally pretty much gotten a hold of that in the last couple of years. And so this is this is a situation that is not new to this county. We certainly, our employees that are here have certainly had a hard time. And it hasn't been real easy for them, the majority either. So, Manatee had a very, very tough recession, and a lot of people still aren't through it yet. I was talking to someone today at lunch, as a matter of fact, and they said to me, look, some areas in the county are doing fine, but a lot aren't. So we're not out of the woods entirely yet as a county, and I think we need to start taking care. We tried to help the sheriff in the last few years get a few more deputies, not as many as he's wanted, but we did what we could. Obviously, we're going to look at that again this year. But we also, it's time we need to look at this county and the employees here too. So I just wanted to touch base on that. I think sometimes we forget that, there's a lot of people that we represent that maybe don't feel exactly the way we do on how we spend their money. So I just think we need to keep that in mind. Commissioner Benak.
Yeah, I just had a question on the TIF. Are we going to talk about the TIF budget and what money is being allocated in the TIF? And
Yes,
Okay. When do we do that?
in one of the workshops.
Okay. All right. Curious to hear that. Okay.
Is that it?
Yep.
Commissioner DeSabatino.
Thank you for bringing that up. So all this is in advance, and, to give the county administrator and staff ideas of where we're going with it. I just met with the detective from South County yesterday, and he was indicating that when you're doing your TIF budget, if you could do a pilot program similar to what we do with the CRAs by allocating officers at Monday through Friday in the morning and in the evening on key locations, and I have the list to see how that's going because of speeding and that sort of thing, to try to slow the speeding down. So, they sit there and they give out tickets after ticket, and it's just not a wise use of the officer's time to do that. But he wanted to know if that's something that we could incorporate into the budget.
Can we have a copy of that, whatever you have? Because
I
again,
took
we all
some
need
notes.
to make
I took
information.
some notes. It was at a
Okay.
breakfast I had with him.
And did the sheriff request it? I'm just curious.
No, he and I were talking. I think he's spoken with the sheriff before, but Sherry's been there at a couple of the Bay Shore meetings where
Hasn't he in trouble?
the detective was there, and he goes around, and so he knows exactly where the streets are, and he's also recommending a stop sign at a certain intersection. So, anyway, but to get back to Commissioner Baugh's statement, you all know I go to my communities all the time. I don't do anything willy-nilly without their permission, without their input, so I would never impose something on someone or a community willy-nilly. We all have rights. But when they're all sitting there saying, I'll gladly pay $25 more so I can have this or that, that's what they're telling me. So I just would never, ever impose anything without them asking. And again, economies of scale, if you go to them and you say, we've put together this budget, we're going to have X landscaping, and we're going to have reclaimed water, and it's going to cost you $10 more a year per household. Would you agree to that? And you have to break it down. That's why I always ask them to break it down for the millage and break it down per household. They always say yes. $10 a year, $12 a year to beautify their neighborhood with landscaping. And I know Palm Air looks gorgeous. Lakewood Ranch looks gorgeous. It improves the quality of the neighborhood. It increases your property values. So for a $10 a year MSTU to make your neighborhood look better. I know you're smirking there, but
I am,
it does
because I
make
wish
a
it was
difference.
only $10 a month or a year. I wish that was it.
So,
That's why I'm smirking.
that's not your, that's for your entire budget. I'm just doing for this landscaping I'm referencing. Thank you.
You know, Robin, maybe you're probably right. You might have some neighborhoods in your area that would be willing to do that. Maybe you should talk to them and let's see if we can't move forward with some of the neighborhoods in your district.
I have,
Good
but we
idea.
need a formula to be able to say, in a nutshell, this is going to cost X amount. They're willing to listen, they want to listen, like the Tuttle situation where the guy turfs all the time, they would love landscaping there, just like on Elcon. But if we don't have, I've been asking for a couple years, exactly how much it's going to cost. I want to give it to them in black and white, exactly how much it's going to cost, within a range.
Ed, maybe you
If it's
can-
pie in the sky, $300 a year, they're not interested, but if it's 30 a year, they are.
But you have to have a petition to do that, remember, like
Yeah,
60%.
But that's what I'm saying. I mean, she could, there would be people in her neighborhood that perhaps would move forward to do that if she had the information to do it. It's a good idea. Commissioner Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and, I'm glad Commissioner DeSabatino brought up that issue because I've been here about 18 months and I've been requesting a CRA north of the river because the residents say we can take in the tax revenue there and invest it right back in that community and put one right beside the city of Palmetto Zone, which means they can interact with each other financially. So you're right, it cleans up the community, the trouble portions of the community where the sheriff is spending tons of money every year. Now, one permit is being pulled, a house here and a house there. If you have a special tax district, it'll improve the quality of life
And
in those areas.
Aren't there like,
Let him
just with,
finish just a moment.
May I jump
Let
in
him
on
fin-
that?
No,
Please.
let him finish, please.
You had a
Trying to
thought?
keep in
Okay.
order.
So those are the things that we need to have dialogue with. Before the city of Palmetto really got their things going when Mayor Bustle was there, and it continued to this day, you've seen what has happened with that money being invested right back in that area. And that's what needs to be done in these trouble spots when you're talking about special tax districts. I think the sheriff said it last year, I'll be right back asking for the same. And I understand why. Because the conditions haven't changed, but he still have to put his deputies out there and patrol those areas. And it's risky. And so those are the things that we need to look at, and I'm still pushing for a CRA north of the river for those areas to get people to come into the community, invest in the community, to remove slum and blight. But there's different requirements that needs to be done in certain areas where they're crime-ridden areas. And it hurts me to say that. People come back here for years and say nothing's changed. You got the same community, no lights, no sidewalks. So what is the plan?
that's what I was going to ask Commissioner Smith, if I may. There are, I believe, 2 or 3 MSTUs, BUs north of the river, and they spend like $25-ish a year on their lighting and projects.
Right.
And they voted that in.
Yeah,
And that,
exactly.
they are in kind of a disadvantaged locations as well,
They are,
correct?
absolutely.
So, thank you.
Good idea. Commissioner Bustle?
Well, speaking from a mayor's standpoint of view, I'll speak from a commissioner's point of view. There are a lot of places in my area, north of the river, where people would be up in arms if they were forced to set up an MSTU to put sidewalks or lights. They don't want sidewalks, they don't want lights. They want it to be rustic and pristine the way it has been for 100 years. Look at Terracea, for example. They don't want the roads widened, no changes.
Right. I had someone tell me.
I respect that very much. But, on the notion of a CRA, you can't just draw a line around an area and say, I want to make this a CRA and eliminate slum and blight. If there's no Riviera Dunes to provide a cash cow, you're just not going to do anything except create another set of bureaucratic lines.
May I respond? I'm glad the mayor brought that up, because when I was a city councilman,
You voted to.
Just,
we voted to extend to bring River Dunes here, and that's the only reason they came, because of the CRA.
Right.
We voted to expand, was nothing there, and if we wouldn't have did that, we would have never got the CRA funding that we get now.
Expanded it so that the cash cows were already in the area.
No, it was nothing there.
No, we know.
well.
But my point is, you got
Taxes.
vacant land.
Yeah,
that
but
people
it
develop.
doesn't work that way.
Mayor, yes, it does.
It doesn't.
Yes, it
Expand
does.
all you want to if you don't have any businesses to pay the taxes.
The revenue from River Dunes, Mayor, is coming in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they never would have developed that. That's why we extended it, so they can
The
develop
reason
that.
you could expand and get more money is because Riviera Dunes continued to build.
They got incentives for doing it
Right.
from the CRA.
Doesn't work that way.
Yes, it does, Mayor.
Commissioner Benak?
Yeah, I mean, the CRA, the problem with the CRAs, as we know, they were set up at the wrong time. There was not investment. CRAs only take advantage of the tax increment. If you don't have the tax increment, you don't have the money to invest. So that was the problem with it. We had our CRAs. We did away with them. We did a TIF. TIF was put in at a really good time because it's been a lot of improvement since then. And we're going to see the benefit of that without a lot of the bureaucracy that goes along with a CRA. As to taxing districts to help make improvements, absolutely. The one in Palm Air has been around as long as I've been around. I mean, that was set up back, in the 80s.
80s, right.
And they've paid that consistently to have a higher level of landscaping. Hasn't been a ton of money. They have a board, they like to oversee it, and it works out well. I met with Reggie Bellamy in the Palmetto area. Staff met with them. Sherry was there. FP&L was there. We talked with Reggie about how to get lighting, how they could do a taxing district. Rabonia, that's how they got lighting. They did it as a taxing district. The people of Rabonia were willing to pay a little bit extra tax to get lighting in Rabonia. Those are not wealthy people, but they took that upon themselves because that's how we can do that. And that certainly is an option for anyone in this community to do. And I think you can sit down with staff, they'll explain how it works and how much it costs. But, anytime you take it on at the government level, there's a little bit extra you have to pay because you got to pay the government people. So that's just reality. CDDs, they do it within their developments. They were established that way. Developments that were built before those improvements were put in, they can do it through a taxing unit, or mostly it's done through an MSTU after the fact, and be set up on the tax rolls. But you need to get community leadership, somebody to say, and you got to talk the people into it. I think there's a percentage that have to all agree to be able to set that up. But you can do that without setting up a CRA. You can do those improvements. You can put them in and have everyone pay a little bit extra on their taxes if they want to do it. But and I hope that other groups will see that this is something that they want to take advantage of.
And that's the key. You've got to talk the neighborhoods into wanting to do that.
Or the neighbors have to talk you into wanting to do it,
Yes.
so you become the advocate for it at the county level. But I think it really's got to come from the neighborhood. And so that was a discussion I had with Mr. Bellamy about that, because he wanted to see some lighting. And actually, I think we had a really great conversation because Alan Tucson was here, and I think they actually put up a light because it was in the city, and, hey, the city said, we got the money, we'll put up a light there, and I think they did. So we at least got that much done, that they did get one light in the neighborhood. But there was never any follow-up saying, yeah, we want to do this. We want to do a taxing district. What will it cost? So that was my recollection on how that went down.
Commissioner Smith?
We're so misunderstood by the community that it's scary for people watching this. The sheriff asking for $7 million to protect his deputies, and what I'm talking about, for 1 year, may cost $2 million to clean up the problem. We're clueless about what we're doing. When the Pamela CRA started, it was $5,000 total in their budget. There was no businesses. The businesses came because of the CRA, and it expanded from there. Vacant land could be CRA special tax districts. It's going to help to the community, improve slum and blight, bring revenue, bring jobs. Folks, your hotel is building over there now. recommending because of the CRA district in Palmetto. Other than that, they won't even be talking about coming. So what are we talking about? The hotel's interested in building beside the Civic Center specifically because they have a CRA. And so we need to capitalize on that to expand north of the river for a different development with a special tax district. Besides that, take the CRA away in Palmetto, the hotel won't come. I rest my case.
All right, I don't have anyone else on the board. Mr. Hunsaker, did you have anything else to add before we adjourn for the day?
No, ma'am. We will be delivering to the commissioners tomorrow the fund summary, and so that you have time to look at that over the weekend before we take you through that next Wednesday. And with that, we are complete with today's presentation. Thank you.
Well, I think the next few weeks will be very interesting. Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.